So I'm delighted to be here, and many thanks indeed to Nick for taking the risk of inviting me. That's great. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you a little about the university, but also to reflect on our experience and why we think this kind of framework is the sort of framework that's required. We're delighted to be working with Elsevier as one of a number of development partners who are now developing the framework that was created as a result of Robert Jan's intervention. And I think we really need to thank Robert Jan and his colleagues at TU Eindhoven for putting their finger on that problem area of being able to explain to universities the value of universities who are really working hard in the region. We know that universities have all got global ambitions. We want to be we want to be excellent in research, we want to be excellent in teaching because we need to attract good students and research funding. But at the same time, often the really vital work that we do in the regions, in our regions, is not quite understood by government. And so anything that we can do to take that forward is really important. And of course, at the moment, we're going through a major period of innovation and technology transformation. And we've got to ensure that our cities and regions are going to be part of the economy of the future. I'll show you how that's worked through in Glasgow. And I must say, I've got some kind of, not bitter experience, but I've got experience of trying to do something like this before. Because in 2017, the UK government decided it wanted to have a series of science and innovation audits for different regions. And so I actually led one which was the science and innovation audit of Glasgow's, it was run by Glasgow Economic Leadership, which is a cross-organizational body, but it was called Enabling Technologies for High-Value Manufacturing and Resilient Infrastructure. So this report, we put an awful lot of work into it, and it really pinpointed to me the challenges that there are of linking university outputs to economic data, right? So the government gave us lots of economic data about the region. We're NUTS Region 2, if that means anything to you. So there's the whole of the central belt of Scotland is one economic region as far as the government is concerned. And the data that comes from that region is interesting, but being able to make the links between that and what you're doing as a university is actually surprisingly difficult. Now, again, just to make sure you're aware of the strategic nature of this kind of work that we're talking about today, last week, Manuel Heitor, who was the chair of the high-level group for the European Union, which has been looking at how they want to change the framework program. They've been looking forward to the next framework program, FP10. He published his report called Align, Act, Accelerate. This came out last week. It's published by the European Commission. And this really focuses on the need for European industry to be competitive on a global stage. And I think that report is also not only going to be influencing the shape of the next framework program, but it's very strongly aligned to the kinds of things that we're talking about this morning. Okay. So finally, I just point out that universities, whatever shape or form they have, are often the largest organization in a particular region or in a city. And they're always playing the important role of ensuring that talent comes into the region and is produced for the region's companies. They're also globally connected. So if a particular region wants to be able to ensure that it's understanding what the forefront of international technology and business looks like, then actually the university, whatever its shape or form, can play that role. Okay? So let's start off then. As I said, very happy, very pleased that we were involved in this. I was there in this. You can't really see me down in the corner there, but that's this discussion, which it was a fabulous discussion. I think lots of people told me that that was one of the best discussions that took place at the conference that was mentioned before, the European University Summit. But what I've done here is I've kind of put down that, from my point of view, when I looked at the criteria, I thought, well, these are the kind of key things for me. Now, this is looking at it from a Strathclyde perspective. These are the 5 things that really resonated for me thinking about the gateway for talent, thinking about what industrial collaborations we have, thinking about what our alignment is with the new technology of tomorrow, understanding what we're doing in terms of supporting student and staff entrepreneurship and spin-outs, so providing the new companies of the future, and then that point about shaping the innovation ecosystem, making sure that we have an innovation ecosystem which is not just fit for purpose, but is actually going to help drive the university and drive the future industrial collaboration that we all want. Okay, now this is supposed to be a little bit interactive, I was told, so this is my attempt to be interactive, and it means that you're going to have to do something. Oh, sorry, I'm not allowed to move from this. Tina told me off. So Tina, I am following your instructions and staying put. Thank you. So I think we're going to switch to something which says poll, and then you'll be asked to answer this question, either yes, no, or I'm not sure.
Okay, so Tim, give me a second. Okay, please, if you're in the audience, if you could grab your mobile app for the conference, and if you could click on the button that says agenda. And yeah, the conference has Wi-Fi. Yeah, if you have, you can do that. So you click on agenda, and then on agenda, you'll see a button that says, a tab that says rate the session, and that's how you vote. And the poll should pop up at that point. One second. All right, so it's in the app, click on agenda, then click on rate the session, and the poll should pop up. All right, we've got a lot of yeses here.
Okay, I think we're getting the idea here. Yeah. We also have a second poll. If maybe we can go on to the second poll. So if you found the first poll, hopefully the second poll is just behind that. Okay, that's really interesting. So this is a bit more mixed. I guess the minority of people at the moment are saying that we really do know how to get that data. A lot of the majority saying no, and quite a substantial number of people saying that they're really not sure. But you're the people who should know, right? Because you're the people who know all about all the data that you've got in the university. So if you don't know, then maybe there's nobody else who knows in the university. So what I wanted to do was just tease out, what your thoughts are about this, what information you already have, because a lot of universities are asked for this, but maybe that doesn't come down to people such as yourselves who are responsible for the research data. But the fact is that this kind of data is increasingly important for being able to demonstrate to our governments that we're doing the right thing, that we're supporting not only the creation of new talent, but also that we are positively contributing in a much broader sense to the development of the regions. And if I speak from the perspective of the UK, you know, the government over the last 10 years has really tried to change the way it's thinking about funding universities across the UK. Traditionally, we had what's called the Golden Triangle, with Oxford, Cambridge, London, where a lot of the big institutions and research organizations are based, and most of the research funding will go there. What they've really tried to do is evening up to some extent. Leveling up was the phrase that Boris Johnson used when he was the Prime Minister. their idea was that in order to transform some of the regions, what we would do would be we would fund the universities to be involved in their regions so that there would be an economic impact on those regions which were not as successful as the southeast of England. Okay, so that kind of idea was prevalent under the previous government. It's going to be very much part of the new government's strategy. And in fact, what we see is that's happening everywhere. And as I already said, with the Manuel Hightower report and the emphasis on competitiveness of the President of the European Commission, we can expect that that kind of view will be taken also at European level with a change of focus. And these are my words, not anybody else's words, but originally the framework program was there really as a symbol of European collaboration with an objective to have people collaborating. Right? Now, there seems to be a shift where actually using that to drive European competitiveness becomes a higher priority. Okay, so it's a really interesting shift there. Anyway, talking about Strathclyde University, we go back actually really far to the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. Our founder, John Anderson, left money in his will for a place of useful learning, right? And this was a real Enlightenment period use of the word useful. It meant that it should be something, in our terms, applicable, but he was really interested in the fact that the Industrial Revolution meant there was a demand for people to have skills which could not be developed through the traditional guilds and so on that had existed for centuries within the city. So he wanted, and he was actually giving lectures himself. He was a professor at Glasgow University. He used to give lessons for people who were not students, the non-toga classes, he called them. And when he died, he left money for the creation of this institution. Through a number of different changes, we grew through the period of bluntly, the British Empire, where Glasgow was one of the largest cities and it was one of the big industrial hubs of the British Empire. Through the 20th century, we became the Royal College of Science and Technology, and then in 1964, we actually got our own university charter and became the first technological university in the UK. So that's kind of our history. Since about 2009, we've been led by a principal, Sir Jim MacDonald, and he's been very much focusing on how we take that concept of the university as a place of useful learning and transform that into something that we could use in the 21st century. Okay, but there's an interesting lesson there, because the lesson for us has been in Glasgow, and you see this picture. This is from 1831. I drive past this place every day, back and forth from my place of work, and I can tell you that these industries are no longer there. These beautiful rural fields are no longer there. This is an inner city, deprived inner city region. There used to be a global locomotive factory which produced half of the locomotives produced in the world on this site. Now it's a little maintenance division, and there's a big supermarket. Okay, so there is a kind of story of Glasgow's industrial decline where big industrial centers have to get knocked down and they get replaced by supermarkets. And there was no other alternative. What we've been doing is we've been saying there is an alternative to that. We do not have to be left behind by new industrial revolutions. And what's really important is we can all see this new industrial revolution that is happening in terms of data, AI, etc. This is really driving a different kind of industry and a different kind of society. And we don't want our regions to be left behind. So it's up to us as universities to ensure that that doesn't happen and to ensure that we are plugged in, we're able to give people the skills to be able to work in that new area, and we're able to give our industries the technologies so that they can be competitive, right? So if we don't do that, then governments bluntly will not think we are worth funding in the future. So this is really important for us. But for us, in Glasgow, it's the second time around, right? So we've seen the glory of our industrial heyday. We've seen the decline, and now we're moving back. Glasgow is very much at the center of a number of global industries now. So what about Strathclyde then? As I said, we're Scottish. I'm wearing, by the way, my university tartan tie here, just so that you know that we're from Scotland. But But we're a multicultural community, 30,000 students. You can see the number of PhDs and so on there. We're very much focused on being a technological university, but one which is socially progressive. We're right by the east end of Glasgow, where there's a lot of poverty and still extraordinarily low average date by which males in particular die in that part of Glasgow. There's a 20-year age difference between the east and the west of Glasgow, so it's quite a staggering difference there. So we're committed as a socially progressive university to make sure that we're working with those communities, but at the same time, of course, we're committed to ensuring that Glasgow has a fantastic future. Now, we talk about ourselves as being a distinctive university because the sorts of things we do look in many ways like more conventional universities, but we are extremely collaborative. We've got values about being collaborative, people-oriented, bold, innovative, and ambitious. These are values that the university adopted after having this. We went through a process of discovery. We went through all sorts of meetings and polls of the staff in order to confirm that these were things that everybody upheld, and that was the case, and it's still very strong. We go back every year, by the way, to check with people whether we are living these values, and there's more than 80, 85%, 90%, depending on which part of the university you go to, if people say 100% yes. We've been pushing interdisciplinary collaboration, but collaboration with businesses as well, and social sciences, so that we're linking those across into all our science and technology research. We do have a big entrepreneurship and commercialization program, but we've got these very, very strong linkages with our industrial partners. So those industrial linkages are ones which, of course, have come largely through the very long-standing work that we do together with our industrial partners and who've grown with us over many years. So all the things we do are underpinned by enabling technologies. And as I said to you, we had this UK government-sponsored report which was looking at enabling technologies in the Central Belt. It's those key technologies which we have which go into just about every kind of industrial collaboration that we have, which make us attractive. Then we work with our business school and so on in order to make sure that those things can get transformed. We work with social scientists in order to make sure that the understanding of people, of society, is fully aligned with that. And over the last few years, in particular, we've been focusing on this regional collaborative innovation ecosystem. So Glasgow is one of the centres which was identified by the Conservative government under Boris Johnson. It was Glasgow, the West Midlands, and Manchester were three regions which were identified as prime regions for funding a new kind of engagement between universities and the region. And they created these things called innovation accelerators. So we've been working alongside colleagues at Manchester, for example, at Manchester University, in the West Midlands, and that's Birmingham, Warwick, and so on, a number of universities there who are working. And we've been able to cross-compare what we're doing from the universities, because the universities have been at the heart of these innovation accelerators, and we've been then trying to focus on what was making our regions characteristic and slightly different. So West Midlands has got this fantastic auto industry. Manchester's got a number of different industries, but they've gone really big into advanced materials, for example. And we've got this focus on enabling technologies, but then driving that into manufacturing, both of engineered systems, so aeroplanes, etc., but also into pharmaceutical manufacturing, which I'll come back to. So that regional focus is working very strongly for us. It works well for Scottish Government, and my Vice-Chancellor has supported the Scottish Government also by helping to develop the Scottish Government's innovation strategy. And underpinning this, it's not just your strategy, it's the way you carry it out. So being able to do things at pace and with agility together with your partners is what can take you to the next level. So then in terms of research and innovation, what we've been doing is we've got excellence across these technology readiness levels, right? So we talk about technology readiness levels from one being basic research right up to Up to 3, people usually talk about universities working on technology readiness levels 1 up to 3, and then after that, 4, 5, and 6 is kind of innovation, and 7, 8, 9 is where industry is supposed to be. We don't find that terribly helpful, because as a university, if you want to break through, and if you want to ensure that the organizations you're working with can break through, you have to work with them from the position that they are starting in, okay? And whenever you've got some kind of complex technology, you'll find that some things are really low TRL and some things are quite high TRL. And what you're trying to do is to build something new, which will be a mixture of all of those things. So it's necessary to have that broader range of skills and think differently to the conventional university way of doing things. So we have this distinctive model, which we've been building around a number of different areas. But in particular, our excellence is, we're not a general university. We're very much a science and technology university, but we've got really excellent fundamental research, in particular around photonics and quantum, world-class experience in chemistry and biochemistry, and around power systems. Now, those are not the only areas, but those are the areas where our really fundamental excellence gets pulled right through into industry centers. And by working with industry closely, we've been able to then to attract new industrial investment into the region in all of those areas. Now, I also talk here about working with partners on a cross-university basis. And what that means is that we've got to have mechanisms that bring our colleagues together. And to do that, what we did was we've developed a number of thematic, well, they're called strategic themes. So these are kind of organizational ways of bringing people together which are completely independent of our faculty and departmental structures. So we have strategic themes around measurement, digital and enabling technologies. We've got thematic themes around energy, advanced manufacturing materials, health and well-being, and ocean, air, and space. And then we've got societal-focused themes around innovation and entrepreneurship, and people, policy, and place. Okay, so by bringing people together from across the university into those kind of thematic groups, we're very easily able to identify colleagues who can input into various different kinds of collaborations, whether those are with business, whether they're with the local authority, whether they're with Scottish government or the UK government. And in particular, on the issues such as sustainability and net zero, then bringing together those cross-disciplinary areas of expertise are really, really vital. So one of the things we've been doing is really to ensure that we're able to bring together all those themes. So let's look at what we're doing in terms of fourth generation university. And as I said, what I selected at the beginning was a number of these headings which appear in the descriptions of fourth generation university, but they're ones which for me particularly resonated because I could say, yeah, these are the things which describe very much what we're doing as Strathclyde University. And we're always looking for new ways to explain what we do, whether that's to government, or it's to our industrial partners, or it's simply to our local authority, the Glasgow City Council and their colleagues. They've got a sense of what we do, but actually finding the right words to be able to express that is often difficult. So again, we're looking to the 4GU concept to be able to put that into a different framework so that we can more easily articulate what it is we do. And as I said at the beginning, I had this experience of trying to do this report, the Science and Innovation Audit, for the UK government. And we didn't have this kind of framework at that point. I do feel that if this sort of framework had been around at that point, it would have been a lot easier to explain to government what the benefits were going to be of the key enabling technologies. So, and in particular, the way the university works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out these things and talk about what we do there. I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of how we operate and how we work. And hopefully this will show you how one university approaches this. But I should also say, although I'm looking at this from the point of view of Strathclyde as a technical university and also CESAR as an association of technological universities, I absolutely think that this kind of framework is going to be useful to any university. Because any university will be asked in the future, what are you doing for the region? You'll be asked by government, what ways are you contributing to the economy, right? Because government looks at the amount of funding that goes into universities, This is happening now in Scotland, by the way. Our core research funding comes through Scottish Government, and as far as they're concerned, as far as a politician is concerned, there's a big block of money going into universities, and it's what we call unhypothecated. In other words, there isn't an absolutely clear reason why they're getting all that money and why it can't be 5% lower or whatever. Those are questions which we have to explain. We have to give good answers to politicians when they're thinking about contributing that money to universities, as opposed to all the other good things which are really important for society, right? And that's the reality of discussing things with government. So we need to be able to explain the benefits now, the benefits in the future. We have to understand from a political point of view, when budgets are challenged, looking at the future could easily be somebody else's problem in the future, right? Whereas we know that investment, continued investment in universities is really vital to keep that going and to keep the expertise in place. So these are all reasons why it's really important and why we think this is a good framework for explaining what we do. So these are the kind of areas, and I'm going to go through those quickly in turn. By the way, at the end of this, I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to talk about the things which are maybe not from Strathclyde's experience, but I think could be helpful to others. So please do think about what other questions you might have about this framework, and I'll try and give my personal view, and if I can't answer the question, then I'm sure Nick can. Right? So this gateway for talent. Now, clearly, as I've already said, every university is producing talent. In fact, when you look at the economic impact of universities, as they've been calculated so far, it turns out that the economic impact of universities is pretty much entirely driven by what we do with our students. Right? And the reason for that is it's actually quite easy for an economist to calculate what the economic impact is of students, because we know from wage surveys how much extra money a graduate earns. So they can just easily put in the numbers, put in the number of students you've got, and crank out the impact on the economy of all those higher wages because we produce graduates. If you believe those are kinds of economic impact assessments, then actually the only thing we should be doing as universities is producing more students, because there's that nice multiplier. And yet, we know that our industries are crying out for support. Those things are much more difficult to measure in terms of economic impact, and they will more or less not appear in economic impact assessments of universities, okay? So this is, again, another reason why it's so important to have a different framework. So in terms of the gateway for talent, we do an awful lot in terms of industry-focused master's programs. That's probably the easiest thing for us to do. We're actually quite a regulated system in Scotland, as far as the undergraduate programs are concerned. But in terms of our master's program, we can be much more agile, and that's what we do. So we've been involved in various different programs with industrial companies where we've developed new master's programs which are specifically aligned to a new initiative that they're doing. And in fact, through the National Manufacturing Institute Scotland, which I'll talk about later, we're able to upscale that to much larger programs, which will help Scottish industry upscale, and also helps us when we're talking about inward investment. We have lots of PhDs and doctoral training in which there are industrial partners, and that's probably the most substantial way in which we can have a longer lasting impact on the work that we're doing with our industrial partners. Much of that is done because they're interested in new research, but they're also interested in the talent that comes along with that. Okay, so they're interested in doing research with us, but if they only did the research with us, they might find it difficult to embed that in their practices. So what they're particularly interested in is doing the research with us and then employing the people who've done that so that they've got that really based, that knowledge based within the company. And in fact, as an example of that, and it's actually a kind of PhD at work program, we run one of the largest programs with GSK. GSK, it's interesting actually, GSK are based in Stevenage, but they come to Strathclyde to do PhDs in medicinal chemistry, right? But GSK is, for the economy of the UK, is really important, really significant. We also work with them on the manufacturing of drugs. So these PhDs at work programs and the doctoral training with industrial partners are a really good way of of not only doing research, getting new research done, but being able to embed it because those colleagues will then go into industry. A particular thing we've done is, which I was very deeply involved in, is this knowledge exchange academic pathway. And this is something which is not unique to Strathclyde, but it's pretty unique to Strathclyde. What we discovered was that when we were trying to set up industrial research projects, and those were going to be longer-term industrial research projects, that our promotion criteria did not recognize that that was a good thing. Right? So actually, the people we wanted to appoint into those programs would get no personal benefit from being involved in one of those programs. So what we did was we invented a whole new academic career pathway. So we have research, we have teaching, and now we have knowledge exchange. And these people sit in the industrial centers, but they also are embedded within our core academic departments. In some cases, about 10% of the people are on this knowledge exchange pathway. And my staff, our academic staff, are often really interested in having somebody on the KE pathway because they are really good at engaging with industry. And they sit in all the different academic departments. So here it's about recognition and reward for doing that engagement. We have, you can get promoted. Actually, one of my former PhD students was our first professor of practice who made it right from the lowest level of our KE career pathway up to being recognized as a professor of practice. Many of them come from industry, and we have about 250, well, it's more than 250 members of staff on that pathway. And the reason why it's so significant for us, if you compare it to Eindhoven, right, Eindhoven has got a number of really, really big industries. ASML was mentioned, Philips was mentioned, and historically they've had joint appointments there. Our industry is much more distributed, that we don't have a couple of really massive ones. We've got a whole load of different companies around us. And so that idea of joint appointments doesn't really work so well in our region. But for us, this was a good solution to be able to do that because these people can then collaborate with a whole load of different industries. And it also aligns with our industrial center model, which again is collaborative with many different companies involved. And again, if you link into one particular company, you're not able so easily to collaborate with the other ones, whereas if you're working for the university, and the university is collaborating with all those companies, then the kind of set of interests is very well defined. So this is something that in our context works very well. Then we've got industrial collaboration. Broadly, it's relatively high industrial research income. I think we're typically in the kind of top 10% of the UK universities for the proportion of our research income that comes from industrial collaboration. Total research income is about 120 million. And at the moment, I think it's about 25 million of that is from industrial research. The kinds of organizations we've been working with, Rolls-Royce Technology Center, so our principal and vice-chancellor was actually the person who founded the Rolls-Royce Technology Center many years ago, and that's led to a whole group of different ones. In particular, one that I'll pick on later is one that looks at continuous manufacturing and crystallization of medicines, and that's done in collaboration with GSK, AZ, Novartis, Bayer, Lilly, Takeda, and Roche, with other universities involved, Bath, Cambridge, Sheffield, Imperial, Leeds, and Loughborough. So these long-standing collaborative industrial research programs are done with partners because as a university, we cannot do everything, but we want to be able to say to our industrial partners, if we're working together, you're not just working with Strathclyde, you're working with the best in whatever is the required area of research. So that takes me on nicely to this point about industrial centers. I've got there a number of the kind of really well-known companies that we're working with. Not the only ones. So, for example, we've recently signed up an agreement with Siemens. We're one of their, I think it's 10 global research partners in Siemens Energy. But you see, the way we've been doing this is building up, and then not just with companies, but also with other organizations such as the UK National Physical Laboratory and Fraunhofer. We've been trying to build up centers which make our region attractive, and they amplify the impact that the university can have. So if I look at this, then we're talking about this a network of different industrial-facing centres, Power Network Demonstration Centre, an Advanced Nuclear Centre, Advanced Forming Research Centre, and then most recently, this National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland. And to do this, we got Scottish Government to support us in developing the programs that we were doing and to create a building which is then funded by the UK government. This is the kind of thing we have to do in Scotland, where we've got the Scottish government and the UK government. But that is then now the basis of an organisation which is going to have a Scottish-wide impact and a UK-wide impact because of the way it's linked into the Scottish and the UK ecosystems, as well as having a Glasgow regional impact. Yeah? So when we're talking about impact, you've got to think about layers. We want to have a city impact, we want to have a regional impact, but those impacts are really going to be most effective if at the same time you're able to help the translation of that into national and international kind of impacts. So nothing we're talking about here in terms of concentrating on the region, I need to stress, is not that you're only looking at the region, right? You're trying to make the region successful. And sometimes to make the region successful, your connectivity to the rest of the globe is going to be a really vital component. Yeah? So universities are really, really well placed to do this, whatever kind of university you are. Okay. So if you're not from the UK, you probably don't know what a catapult is. Other countries have got similar kinds of systems. In Holland, they've got TNO. In Germany, well, you've got Fraunhofer. You've got various other sorts of organizations. The UK version of this is called a catapult. That drives UK funding into certain kinds of industries, or to support certain kind of industries. And the high-value manufacturing catapult is probably the biggest and most successful of these catapults. Sorry, did I say most successful? I wouldn't make that comparison between different catapults, but it's certainly one that we work very, very closely with, and they've really very strongly supported digital manufacturing. Right. So, in my narrative, what I want to start to is I'm going back to those themes that occur within the 4G framework. So one of those themes is the alignment to key technology clusters. Now these are sometimes called enabling technologies. There's various different phrases, and I know within the 4G framework there's a Dutch classification of these different technologies which they use. Personally, I find those different classifications they come often from a kind of an older, so I'm not knocking the Dutch one, by the way, but often they come from an older sort of framework, and technology develops the whole time, right? So what we think is important, right? AI would not have been on these things 10 years ago, right? So these things are changing all the time, and these are the sorts of things that we have within our own key technology clusters, and where we're collaborating closely with international national and international innovation agencies to ensure that we can really drive things very quickly and be at the forefront. So, then in terms of spin-outs and alumni-funded companies, these are the sorts of things we're doing. We're actually named European Entrepreneurial University of the Year in 2023, which was wonderful. But 10 years previously, we were the UK Times Higher Education Entrepreneurial University of the Year. I'll show you in a second the kind of timeline, but again, this is something that we think is very much at the heart of Strathclyde, and being entrepreneurial and being an entrepreneurial university, and I know many universities work on this because it's a really great way of motivating students. I think one of the things that helps us, frankly, is being a place of useful learning. Strathclyde is known to be slightly different from other universities, and that means that students sometimes students and staff sometimes either love coming to Strathclyde or they decide they don't want it because it's not for them, and that's fine. But actually, we attract students who are pretty entrepreneurial, and so the entrepreneurial ecosystem that we've developed, which faces into students and faces into our an Entrepreneurs Fund for Startups, is something that's been very successful for us. And as you can see, we've created 220 startups and more than 60 spin-outs since we've had a kind of formal program. And it's one of those things that works really, really well with our alumni because we have a Strathclyde entrepreneurial network which will bring all those colleagues together. And that's the that's the kind of commitment. So this was when our kind of commercial operations really started in earnest. And I think I started getting involved in it around about here because I helped to create our first entrepreneurial hub. And again, it's been growing, it's been expanding, and we're just developing a new version of the strategy, which will be launched quite soon, in time for the start of the new year in 2025. So we've been pretty successful in terms of this. But again, what's different, what we're doing differently is most universities will try to spin something out and then their investment will stop. What we do is we have a commercialization strategy. We think that once the spin out has left the door, right, they're out there and they need to be supported as a commercial company. So the university's investment in these things is done on a commercial basis, but that helps to attract other kinds of investment as well. So one of the key challenges that we have in Scotland, and probably a little bit more than on average in the UK, but being distant from London, venture capital is tight in Scotland, and therefore the willingness of the university itself to invest in its own spin-outs is a really key marker for other investors to come in and co-invest. Yeah? So these are the kind of ways you have to start thinking as a university if you're going to do this broader work. Now, I'm sorry, something happened with the slides, so my pictures have gone a bit wonky occasionally, so apologies for that. But the final point is about shaping the shaping the innovation ecosystem. And here's where we really try to provide this leadership role in driving the regional ecosystem. And I've said Glasgow City region and beyond. What we have in Glasgow is the City of Glasgow and the City region, which is about 8 different councils. Then we've got the Central Belt, which is the main area of industrial activity and business activity in Scotland. That's between Edinburgh and Glasgow. We're really focusing on this particular region, and that's where we're trying to work with the city authorities. So we have a really strong partnership with them. But I mentioned before that it's not just a single university that's involved in here. This is how we've been developing the ecosystem to make something which is good for our researchers to work with, but also attractive for companies to come into, right? So all of these organizations here on the left, you've got UK-funded innovation organizations which have settled, they've got an office or they've got a major facility around. We've got a number of Scottish Government innovation centres. Again, that's driving other forms of industrial collaboration. Those are Scotland-wide, but they've got a base at Strathclyde because that's a really good place to be. We've got various UK-funded national research and technology organizations, and we've even got the only Fraunhofer organization based in the UK. So what's the point of that? The point is that a university cannot do it all on its own. And if the only thing you can say is, well, you can come and we can find an academic who will be interested to talk to you in between their teaching, that's not very attractive. But if you've got not just the university, but you're underpinned by all these organizations who are all very attractive, then what you're doing is you're creating a honeypot. And this is a honeypot which attracts companies now because they can see that somewhere in here they're going to get value. And other organizations like this come in here because they can see that companies will be going there anyway, and so it's a good place to be, right? So that's what I mean by the honeypot effect. This is something which, this is, by the way, our principal and vice-chancellor describes this as a 19-year overnight success, right? So, but these are the things that we've been doing in order to bring things into the university, and sometimes money doesn't come to the university, it comes to one of these organizations, but we know that on the whole we're better off because we've created an ecosystem around us that is good for the university. It's an environment in which we as a university can be successful. That's the way we've been thinking about this, yeah? So, and core to that is actually this idea of innovation districts. We've been working on this. We launched Glasgow City Innovation District in 2019, and that was actually one of the key reasons why the UK government decided to invest this innovation accelerator into Glasgow. They'd also referenced the UK government's R&D strategy, as you just saw, referenced to Strathclyde and Glasgow City Innovation District, also mentioned in the National Innovation Strategy in Scotland. So creating this as a location and as a collaboration between the university, the city authorities, Scottish enterprise, the Scottish Organisation of Businesses, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and so on, and Entrepreneurial Scotland. This has been a great collaborative activity for us in focusing interest in the region, which is where the university is, but it's a good region because we've got all these different science and technology organizations there. It's a really interesting place for other people to come. They don't have to stay there, but they come in and out. And then alongside that, the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District Scotland, which is where our National Manufacturing Institute Scotland, I'm sorry, this picture is supposed to show two of the big institutes there. This has got a regional, a Scottish and a UK role because it's got these centres which are supported by UK government funding. The two key things are the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, which was built by the Scottish government funding, but its operations are supported by the UK government. And that is just a fantastic, all singing, all dancing institute, which is making digital manufacturing accessible. Okay, and again, this is this point about if you had industry in the past, if you had a great innovation ecosystem in the past, as we did in the Victorian era and up to maybe the 1950s, but if you lost it, that's not irrecoverable. There is a future beyond turning your old industrial sites into shopping centres, and the future is this. The future is that you invest through your universities and through regional authorities into collaborative industrial research centres which will attract the new industries, right? So we used to have massive amounts of manufacturing. We're now supporting our companies to make that transition into digital manufacturing, and that's what those centres are doing. We've got the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, which is driving the work that we've done with GSK and AstraZeneca, wonderful international centre there. And then we're about to get an oligonucleotide manufacturing centre as well. So these things, and also an advanced net zero innovation centre. So you can see these industrial centres are really at the heart of our strategy here. And there's, again, a picture of fantastic building. If you fly over Glasgow Airport, you'll see a big purple building, and that's what this is. So the reason I put this slide up is because I want to talk about the mission briefly. Nick said I'm not only Associate Principal for Research and Innovation at Strathclyde, I'm also the Vice Chair of CSER's Innovation Task Force. A few years ago, what we did was we wrote a report which was about what we called Mission 3.1. So mission, what the university sees as being so important that it's one of the central things for the university to be doing. We were trying to articulate the fact that many of the CSER universities were so committed to the innovation agenda that they were investing much more funding and so on into that area than was kind of, from an economic point of view, a reasonable thing to do. They were doing it because they believed in it. But if you're doing something because you believe in it and you're subject to lots of pressures, that's a precarious position to be in. So what we were arguing here was that actually the European Commission should be funding this sort of work, innovation, ecosystem leadership. Unfortunately, as a result of doing this, in the current framework program within the EIC, they did introduce for the first time some funding for ecosystem leadership. So that was partly as a result of our interactions then, together with the joint research centres who turned out were doing something similar. So we were working together. We influenced that as an outcome. And you can see that that's something that's really now at the heart of what they're thinking about. So coming towards the end now, and I've kind of stressed, I've been talking about this from a point of view of a technological university, and you can probably see from a technological point of view, it would be a natural thing for the technological university to be involved in this. What I want to stress is that every kind of university will find value in this kind of approach. And just as an example, I met Craig Arnold in the summer, wonderful guy who's kind of he's that leads up innovation for Princeton University. We had a really good chat about this, and he told me about the initiative that he had, which actually turned out to be sort of equivalent to an initiative that we've got in Glasgow, which I've not mentioned. We have what's called a place-based innovation accelerator around photonics, actually, now. So we tried this before, it didn't get it, but now in the new, more place-based scheme, we've got some funding for that. And that's not just Strathclyde, it's with Glasgow University, It's with Heriot-Watt and Aberdeen and St Andrews. So those universities together, coming together around photonics. But Princeton, it turns out, are doing the same thing in their region. Right? Now, of course, Princeton is an archetypal classical university, but incredibly well-respected and incredibly well-known, and they're doing this in their region because they see the need to support economic growth and their local industries. So the kinds of things I'm talking about are also really important for Princeton. If they're important for Princeton, I'm sure they'll be important for your university as well to be able to pick up on. So drawing this all to a close, we've talked about all these different things. We've talked about the way Eindhoven has led this initiative, great initiative, and we're really pleased that Robert Jan put his finger on this kind of sore point, and we're really delighted that Elsevier have picked up the mantle and are now taking this forward, and we're looking forward to working with Elsevier and the other colleagues who are development partners in order to make this something that's going to work across a range of universities in a range of different regions in the globe. It's important that we do that because I know Elsevier want to make this a really successful product that will get picked up and used, and of course it will get developed over the years to come, I'm sure. So it's going to be something where we'll all be watching with interest. And these are the ones that actually Nick already put up, and I've picked out a few of these things to talk about here, but you can see that what they're trying to do is give you a number of different dimensions which reflect that. Final point, lots of people are interested in this thing. They're interested in the way in the innovation districts as well. We've actually just opened University of Strathclyde, Bahrain, our first international international branch of the university with the Bahraini authorities. And one of the interests that they've got is because they want to have an innovation district alongside University of Strathclyde, Bahrain. And we also last week had 10 Thai universities coming to look at what we're doing with these innovation districts in order to see how they can be translating that into Thailand. So that was the Thai Innovation Agency funding that. So global interest in these sorts of concepts, and I'll finish there and very happy to answer any questions that you've got. Thank you.
Is this working? Well, thank you so much, Tim. And you might be afraid of Tina because she told you to stand behind that desk. I'm afraid of Tina because she said, make sure everybody sticks to time. But we do have time for a few questions. At least it left me with a lot of fruitful thoughts. Anybody? Yeah, Graham?
Yeah, hi Tim. Thanks very much. Very inspirational and gives us a lot of ideas to think about. One thought, and you touched on this, is about the honeypot, the honeypot effect, and the idea of sort of industry, sort of drawing on industry and things like that. How do you see that working sort of on a day-to-day basis in the sense of small to medium business enterprises, large business enterprises? How do they find your front door? How do they find out your success thus far to sort of expand and build on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I must say that I've been trying to get a front door for the university for an awful long time, for as long as I've been in post, and I've still not quite managed it. But I mentioned the industrial centres, and typically those have got a kind of what we call a two-tier membership model, whereby you've got some of the leading companies involved as the tier one partners, and they drive the industrial collaboration and the industrial research program. But they have tier two partners who are typically those smaller companies who are probably in the region, don't necessarily have to be in the region, but they like to be involved in those programs because they're going to be in the supply chain of the large companies. And so by doing this, they get on the development pathway for their tier one partners, for the companies that they're suppliers to. And that means they're in that technology development from day one. And so they've got a real advantage when it comes to getting the contracts with those larger companies. So a clever and entrepreneurial small company can get involved in that way in what we're doing, and they get access to a fantastic range of global companies.
Hi. I just wanted to follow up because I think you've built an amazing ecosystem there, but I'm really conscious that there's three legs to that ecosystem. One being the universities, the other being industry, and then you've got government. And I think in the UK, having worked there myself in the past, government is very pro-innovation. I'm now working in Australia where perhaps the government is not quite so positive about innovation and the industry ecosystem isn't as research intensive. So in that sort of environment, I'm interested in your thoughts on how you can start to build that ecosystem with perhaps less support from the other two legs.
Well, so my suggestion is you start with your industrial partners. I've talked about a lot of investment we've got there. Now, the University of Strathclyde is influential, but it's not that influential, right? It's the companies who are really influential. So if you've got a good company relationship, then those companies will make the case to government for you. And that's really what's driven all of the, not all of the success of Strathclyde, but it's driven an awful lot of that success because government, the companies have got the kinds of access that we don't in general as universities, the kind of access that we would like, but they can come along and say, we would like to be able to do this. So the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, for example, AstraZeneca and GSK both put £7 million into the infrastructure of that building. And they said to government, you put in the rest. Right? So when they're doing that, for us, it's easy. We're just kind of riding on the coattails. But we're riding on the coattails of a relationship that we built up over many years. So that's where I would start. Yeah? And it's all about being able to make a value proposition. And this is really key. Many times we kind of expect that people will understand the value of the university. But actually, we're in competition with lots of good causes across the rest of government priorities. And it's not just good enough for them to have a general sense of universities are a good thing. We have to give specific value propositions for the investments that we're looking for. And again, this kind of framework will help you shape what you're doing, but also help attract the industry and help get the industry to help you make those value propositions.
Thank you. Again, a lot to think about. And this may be an answer that Nick may have, but you're talking about a different university than I work at. So do you have any medical health university examples, either of you, that you could share that we could look at?
Yeah, well, actually, I could have been talking about the work we're doing with the National Health Service in Scotland, which I didn't, but certainly there are quite a few universities. Glasgow University, for example, our neighbours have got a very strong relationship with the Golden Jubilee, sorry, with the main Glasgow hospital. We've kind of gone in, we don't have a medical faculty, so we're quite complementary in that way, and so we work with a number of the NHS organisations on technology and on business organisation, and then various kind of social sciencey kind of related things to do with health and care. But I could have spent a couple of slides talking about how we work with the National Health Service. Actually.
I need to make sure I keep up being a good friend with Tina. So we have to close down for questions now, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming here and talking about what you do at Strathclyde.
It's a pleasure to come. I'm very happy to take any questions, talk to people outside. Yeah.
Perfect.